This is Labors, and it's so nice to have you here. These are the paints you need. First, I use the airbrush with storm vermin fur, and I add a couple drops of thinner, like 6 or 7, to 5 brushfuls of paint. While I add the paint to the cup, I always mix it with the brush to reduce the chance of clogging, and I pinch on the needle like it's granny's nipple and pull back the trigger so the paint could mix in the nozzle as well. My compressor is at 11 o'clock, and I use a 0.2mm airbrush. Keep in mind, if your needle size is different, you might need a different airbrusher as well. I block in the volumes, aiming my brush around a 100-degree angle. I go all around the mini and apply several layers. When you are airbrushing and you feel like the paint isn't really coming out of the airbrush as easily as you started, always check your needle tip and remove the drying paint from it with a toothbrush or using your tiny hand. I usually use my hand, but a toothbrush soaked in some airbrush cleaner is always a better choice, but nobody has time for that. When it comes to painting stone statues or just stone itself, I would highly recommend to add more color to the subject and not just using plain grays. However, as you can tell, Papa Labors is using a pretty boring gray. So let me rephrase. You can use some desaturated greens or warmer browns, darker blues for example, to add some flavor to your stone. And that's a big if your composition and color scheme allows it. This chi statue has a chi flowing through all over it. And the art team of Zombicide decided that it's going to be blue. I mean the color of the chi. However, if you grew up around the same time period as Papa Labors, then you know that chi is supposed to be gold. And you are pretty old, by the way. Anyway, the mouth and the eyes have this blue glow to them. So to make those areas stand out more, we use a more desaturated palette for our highlights of the stone. Alright, let's switch to a brush and continue the process with a mix of storm vermin fur and stone grey. And I define the highlights more over the surface with a base layer consistency. The other part of every mini we paint that is pretty important is the composition of the volumes or the highlight placement. But not just the general shape of the highlight that follows the subject's shape, but how much we like to highlight, so how much volume we apply. I use a very common composition for basically every mini I paint, or at least most of them. I add more volume to the head and shoulders, and as I go down to the legs, I try to add less and less. This will gently move our eyes to the head of the miniature, creating a focal point. You can play around with this to express the ambience of the mini. Adding less volume to the overall subjects means that it's in a dark environment, or you just like to have a very dark mid-tone, creating a menacing look. And with brighter tones, you can communicate the opposite feeling. And yet, this has nothing to do with color, but adding color to the concept will also stretch the possibilities that we can express through our work. I'm painting these Zombicide minis for a client, and he prefers the box art style, but I still have some room to play with the volumes. Also, painting this cheese statue was way more fun than I thought it would be. Sometimes painting a more boring subject like a statue, because it's mostly one color, can be a bit dull, but I really enjoyed that. You know, I don't have to go back to a detail if I missed it with a certain color. It was quite nice. Sometimes I get around to minis that I'm not super excited to paint, and yet I enjoy the process even more than the ones I'm super thrilled to get to, but every game has these. Like last month on Patreon, on the Marvel Zombies poll, you guys voted for Red Skull. I love the character, but that's among the few heroes I painted with one of my students, so I had to prime it again and repaint the whole thing. And I don't know what's about it, but the face came out pretty well. And after that it was a new miniature again, and it didn't felt like something that I painted already. I don't know, it was fun, and I had assumed I'm going to suffer through the process since I'm repainting something I already painted, and I try to avoid that just as a general rule of thumb, because repainting minis is such a time waster, and I think you should avoid it at any cost, even if you're a commission painter or someone who do this as a hobby. But you know, it's funny how our mind projects something negative toward the process, even though the process itself isn't as bad. So Yeah, I really liked painting this stone statue. Since we have a carved stone surface, we can emphasize the texture with some small dots and lines between the shadow and highlighted parts. Giving some texture to the surface could always help with blending as well and create some more weathered feel. I like to keep these details small, so it will look like the stone was chipped and scratched over time. This is going to be a gaming piece, so I don't want to leave too large shadow areas on one side, but I do like to have a little bit more volume over the left side of the statue. Just a bit more than the other side, so this way we will have a composition that is a little bit more interesting rather than highlight everything with a more centric approach to the highlight placement. As my layers are getting more and more opaque, I switched to a little bit thinner consistency that I still use to add more texture to the surface and to blend in the more rough looking transitions. Even though the subject is stone, it was carved very nicely and smoothly, and we can emphasize that. We're going to raise the values with stone gray, and this is going to be the last highlight color that we use. It's a pretty good neutral color, I like to use it a lot, and we're going to continue the highlight process as we did in the previous step, reducing the size of our layers inside the previous layer, but with more attention to the details like the face and the mane of the lion. The process for the mane is basically the same if we were painting the hair of any miniature. We already blocked in the major volumes, we have defined our light source, so now we only need to make sure we don't lose the details like Granny losing her teeth. The mane has these awesome curves, so all we need to do is to accentuate the round cylinders and pick out the edges of the hairlocks. Place these highlights a little bit over the front of the curves and make sure these highlights goes side to side on each fur patch over the more flat areas, okay? To have more detail to the hair, keep some recessed shadows between the patches that are provided by the previous layers we used, but if you feel like you lost some of these, just go back with storm vermin fur to reintroduce them to the crevices. Do some checkup runs to check your ratios and to see which part needs more or less volume. Same goes for the tail. Since we build up these highlights over the head now, the rest of the mini feels a little bit dark. It's really a back and forth process every time, and if you're not sure if you need more volume or not, take a photo of your mini and it will tell you right away. You can see I slightly add more volume over the left side, just like in the previous step, so the statue will have this very organic gradient all over its body. I was wondering how to do the broken parts because I first thought there is a crystal inside the statue, but after reading the rulebook, it turns out the statues can be broken, so they don't give you as much chi compared to when they are intact. So I thought it would look cool if the broken parts is a shattered glowing crystal, but it wouldn't make sense with that narrative. So I just painted it as stone, but you know, you do you. Also, if you want to paint these super fast and maybe you don't want to follow the illustration, then just cover it with Brass Scorpion and give it a wash or two of Agrax Earthshade and apply some teal recess shade as an oxidation effect. On the base, I build up a gradient that is higher in value towards the front left corner, emphasizing the more volume over the left side. So this way the highlight placement feels more organic and integrated with the rest of the statue. After that, I paint the eyes with ice yellow and the mouth as well. These will act as an undercoat for the blue glow that is coming from these areas. On the eyes, I use a base layer consistency, but on the mouth, I add more water to the paint so it flows into the recesses a little bit better. It's okay if you make some mistake over the teeth, just go back with storm vermin fur to fix them. Once we have this high value undercoat, we can glaze some Achriman blue over the eyes and the mouth. It's very important that we do not apply this color only over the ice yellow parts, but to their close surroundings as well, because that's going to create a glow effect as the blue bleeds over. I use a wash-like consistency and I use a hairdryer to speed up the drying process. It's very important to wait for each layer to dry before applying the next one for the best results. Once we have a nice blue glow, I go back to the eyes to push the values over them, so they will stand out a little bit more. Lastly, I glaze some deathward forest between the highlights and the shadow areas to add more visual interest to the stone surface and a mossy feel. Moss can only build up over the shadow areas or Granny's armpit, but it would look nice to have this green on more parts. With that, the cheese statue is done and ready for the table. Let me know if you guys found this video helpful, and if you're interested in more guides for white, head over to my Patreon page, where you will find tons of PDF guides and exclusive content. Thanks to my patrons for their support, with special shout out to Cold-Blooded Dom, Trying to Paint Minis, Jonathan Mosner, Glitchy McCrash, Penoman45, Earthapple21, Michael Kerr, Remlo, Svenno, Simon Stefan, and Courtney Hester. I hope your day will be as smooth as a granny's butt cheek.